Hello there, you are listening to The Screen Queen, where you'll be finding your favorite movie or your favorite television show and learning something new. You'll just have to listen to find out. Here is your host, Samantha Parrish. Hello there and welcome back to the show. As always, and for the past 2.5 years, my name is Samantha Parrish and you are listening to The Screen Queen. So 2024, it was a year. There are a lot of people that have been royally screwed by this year. And people are just going into 2025 like the characters are going through Squid Games. We're just getting weapons and just trying to survive. And as much as this year chewed me up and spit me out, and then chewed me up again, and then threw me out of an airplane, and then let me drown in the sharks, and then gave me a paper cut, there were some good things in this year. I do have to count the blessings. And one of those blessings is the fact that I have still kept this show going. Even though outside of my life as a creative, I struggle in many avenues, but having the consistency of this show and having this show reach 100 episodes, that's a pretty good landmark. I got to pat myself on the back for that. Usually I end every year on the show recounting the best moments, behind the scenes moments, the drill. But this year, I wanted to do something different. But this was not the idea that I was originally going to be doing to end the show. But after I heard so many complaints and criticisms about this movie, I had to throw my hat in the ring and give a proper send-off to 2024 by explaining why Longlegs should be given a second chance. Now, before I get into the episode, I do have to say that I recorded this episode over the weekend, so I still sound a little bit nasally. But hell or high water, I wanted this out before the end of the year. I wanted to serve this movie justice just like it served me everything that I was looking for. So here we go, guys. Enjoy the episode. I think it goes without saying that Longlegs was one of the most intriguing trailers that came out in 2024. It was the most talked about. I heard my friends talking about wanting to go see Longlegs in the theaters and wanting to see the experience. Like, people liked what they were seeing. Every single time I saw this trailer, I felt my breath just start to slowly dwindle away, and it was everywhere. But then it went from being everywhere to being nowhere. Like, throughout this year, you still hear the increments of some of, the best films. I'm sure we're going to be hearing about Wicked for a long fucking time. Twisters. We're hearing about Inside Out, too. I heard nothing about Longlegs. The only thing I heard, though, was that people hated it. And I'm like, hate is a strong word. What's with the hate? And there were critiquers saying that it had good positive reviews, but then I heard friends and other peers saying oh, it just was a terrible ending. IMDb, it spared no mercy, said that it was boring, and I'm like, nah, sorry, that doesn't match with what I'm seeing here. There's something in there. So I finally got the chance to rent it myself and see it. And I loved it. But I'm not just saying that because I love true crime, and not because I love horror films, not because I love horror films with Nicolas Cage, or the fact this looks like Silence of the Lambs. This was a freaking cinematic masterpiece. This really felt like a callback to the old 60s and 70s cinema. It's just, the atmosphere is dripping with so much that you get embedded into this. Any film that's willing to make it like an artistic experience, that's not like any other horror film. It's just a certain quality you don't get all the time, especially for horror films today. But this film also does come from Hollywood royalty. Osgood Perkins definitely deserves the praise that he did for this film. But it's also being looked at as kind of like a coming down the line because his father is Anthony Perkins from Psycho, who is also a part of some of the greatest horror films ever. So kind of feels like everything's falling down the line here. So how did this fall off the line, man? It's just, there's a lot to get into. So usually I do a synopsis, but I'm pretty sure everyone is familiar with the FBI agent that's hunting down a killer named Longlegs that sounds like Nicolas Cage. It is funny looking back, though, that everyone's first reaction to this movie was The Silence of the Lambs, solely because of the first line that we ever hear, where a little girl asks the main character, what's it like being a female FBI agent? Is it scary being a female FBI agent? And it's just like, oh, so we're going into Silence of the Lambs territory. But I like how the film didn't rip off Silence of the Lambs. It almost looks like it because not every day you hear about a female FBI agent, but that's the thing. You don't hear about female FBI agents. They're either not written well enough or they're Clarice Starling. That there's only two options there, guys. Like, unfortunately, we don't get too many of them. But because it's a horror film, that's an even bigger specificness that you don't always get. So now we have a new female heroine that's going to be a part of this dark thriller horror film. But she isn't Clarice Starling. I remember my first thought was to call her Clarice Starling 2.0, and when I watched the movie, I'm really glad that she didn't turn out to Clarice Starling 2.0. She is so miles difference in Clarice Starling. But it's not bad to at least be referenced, that now there's a continuation of making more characters that are female field agents. So, I mean, still, I know this film has its problems, but look at that for a second. But even with that hype about a new female FBI agent character, a hunting down Nicolas Cage seemed like the best thing ever. And then all of a sudden it wasn't. So there's a little story I'm going to tell you. And you're going to find this story to be a little bit familiar. So back in the 90s, Anthony Perkins died. And Osgood grew up not only without his father, but his father's rumors. Since the 1950s, there's been rumors about Anthony Perkins being gay, only for them to be true in the future. But at the time, in the 90s, and it reads, Anthony Perkins dies of AIDS, it opened a lot of questions up for Osgood to wonder, how long has his father been gay? Why did his mother marry him? And he kept asking her questions, and she just would never have the conversation with him. And unfortunately, Osgood would never have any of his questions or any conversation about his father with his mother. Barry Berenson was on the plane that crashed in 9/11. So this dude lost his father to AIDS and then his mother to one of the most horrific attacks in U.S. history. So, with that story said, in Longlegs, Harker has a troubled relationship with her mother where she feels her mother is hiding things from her. When I put the story together upon reading that Osgood Perkins wrote this because of his mother, and then I connected it to the story, it made a lot more sense. I could see where Harker comes from. That moment alone, that confession alone, is why I'm here to say this film is not as bad as people make it out to be. Yes, the ending is weird, and I'm going to get around to it, but knowing that he wrote his trauma into this story, it hits on a different level, since there's been different ways that some of the children of Hollywood have told their story about what it's like. And well, this is his version of it. I go out of my way to tell my friends about this before watching the movie because it makes it it carries it so much more to understand some details. And it's not seen as too dark anymore. This film, yes, is an homage to serial killers, and it's a great performance for Nicolas Cage, but the fact that Osgood's trauma was written into this movie, there are times I have to remind myself that this movie is made by the guy who was the dork in Legally Blonde. Yes, he's Anthony Perkins' son, but this was what I knew him as. And it's so fucking wild to see how his career has taken off. This man is, my goodness, he's really put in the time for horror films. He has made a film called The Blackcoat's Daughter. He did a deal with Netflix and made I Am the Pretty Thing That Lives in the House. Like, it is amazing that this man has come from Legally Blonde to highest grossing film for Neon ever. That's such a major freaking boss move, and I salute that man. That's why I gotta give him his credit. And also, as a bonus thing that I just saw, he was in the movie Nope. So the man still does do some dabbling in acting here and there. And I like how Osgood Perkins just exists in horror that is different than his father's, but he still made an impact. But there's something else to appreciate, and that's the other reason why we're here. Nicolas fucking Cage, dude. This was his best movie. And he's done a lot of horror films, but this just... the stuff that Nicolas Cage did for this movie, because he also wrote this movie about his mother. So he was all in with Osgood to be like, oh man, I want to talk about my mom trauma too. Let's do this. So like... oh my gosh. But the craziest thing is finding out what Nicolas Cage does for a talent. I mean, there's already a massive weight of talent to him to begin with. Sorry, I had to do that. But there was a sound director that came forward to Osgood and had to talk about how crazy Nicolas Cage makes his voice in this movie. So Nicolas Cage has said that he has a very unusual talent, unusual, that his voice can get to a certain diction or like decibel for whatever it needed be. And the sound guy was just in awe to have to say that Nicolas Cage got his voice directly to a high note and then got his voice down to a certain low decibel, but it wasn't too low. It was just right at the line before it would go below low, or again, before high. Like, to have a certain ability to have your voice go up, like, we're kind of unpredictable beings. It's hard to, actually know where does your voice stand. And this man does. That's terrifying and impressive. That sound guy is going to be having nightmares for the rest of his life, knowing that he saw the craziest thing on his job. But there's something else to think about, too. This is Nicolas Cage's first and only portrayal of a serial killer. I had to think about that for a second, because this man is known for playing more villains than anything, and killers too, but never a serial killer. And he has gone on to say that as much as he's wanted to play one, it's not something that he would want to do numerous times because of the dark material. And I can understand that. Nicolas Cage was a part of a film called The Frozen Ground that dealt with an Alaskan serial killer and is based off a true story, and that shit is dark. Like, I can 100% get behind not wanting to have to endure such a dark space of life. And my God, he's one of the few people that can dip into it and then dip out, because he's Nicolas Cage. He really made it count here, and he did also say that he wanted to play a satanic serial killer, so at least he got everything he was bargaining for. He made the one-time count all the way through. But I did read that Nicolas Cage was not the original choice. He was a part of it all the way through with the writing, but if Cage was going to pass on actually playing the character, there had to be a backup. So Osgood Perkins only had another option to ask Brad Pitt if he wanted to play Longlegs. And I'm like, I mean, it could possibly work, but sometimes you just gotta let someone out of their cage to do a film like this. And I don't know if Brad had the pits to do it. I just don't think. I like Brad Pitt in some things, but him playing a serial killer is not too far on my list. Well, I think now's about a good time as any to talk about the reason why Longlegs was derailed was its ending. So I'm going to try and keep this as relatively spoil-free as I can, but I am going to be including a few spoiler snippets, if you will. When I was nearing the end of this movie, I was starting to question what route it was going to take, because I haven't seen too much in the usual, like, avant-garde serial killer movies. This is just kind of more confusing as it was intriguing that we don't really know what Longlegs is yet. We know it's horrific murders, but how is this bitch gonna end? The supernatural route was something I didn't see coming. So on one hand, I can see where people felt the movie fell flat for them. If I walked into a serial killer film and I didn't expect it was going to be anything remotely supernatural, I would have been like, all right, that's a move. Nothing in this inclined that it was supernatural. Nothing from the trailer indicated this was supernatural, so it really felt like it was coming out of left field. But on the other hand, they still committed to it. Yeah, it's not the ending that people envisioned, but at least there was a commitment for it. Everyone was not sleepwalking in that final part of it. To see Blair Underwood turn evil and wonder what's going to happen with Harker's mom, like, you are presented with heavy things that you know this is not going to end well. It did end a different way, but I still felt that the horror film ended the way that all horror films have to leave, an impression. You leave this film knowing all is not well, and it did deliver that, even if it wasn't delivered the way people envisioned it. Now, looking on that ending, I'm not entirely married to it being supernatural. It did catch me off guard. If there was another ending in place, it could probably make the fans a little bit happier. And I don't really know for sure if there were other endings made. But as a creator and a writer that has to make a radical acceptance about what is written has to be put out there, and at that point it's the fans' choice. Like, I can understand the choice that had to be made, that it's not going to be agreed with, but it is the ending of Longlegs. But I do like that it does end with good old Nicolas Cage. Now, come on, like, you can't not have a Nicolas Cage film end without seeing a little bit more Nicolas Cage. I feel like that little moment before the credits, that made up for the weird supernatural stuff for me. But to be honest, if it ended with just a regular serial killer thing, then I feel like that would have just made it like Silence of the Lambs. People walked into this movie feeling that it was like an homage of different films, particularly Silence of the Lambs. And this film does a very good job paying homage to its references without having its references carry the film. I feel like the film is interesting enough that the ending doesn't ruin it for me. I still think about the things in this movie, from Nicolas Cage doing that bizarre chant to him like lowering down the screen and scaring the bejesusicles out of me, where all of the shots that held on many unnerving stances, like, this thing committed to being a horror film, and I gotta give it credit. It committed to being a different type of horror film, and I like how the entire time I watched this, even though I could feel the references, I feel that it was fresh. This wasn't a cut, copy, paste of other serial killer movies or satanic movies or whatever. This was one of a kind. It comes from someone who is embedded from Hollywood royalty and made something fresh. This film had me within the first few shots. In the beginning, when Lee Harker is walking outside. 9-year-old Lee Harker, nothing could possibly go wrong. All she's doing is walking outside. She looks to the left, and you hear a sharp noise. And then she looks to the right, and then you hear the same sharp noise. And the first thing I thought is, oh, we're fucked. There is no safety in this movie. There is no sense to prepare for anything. If I can't even see a threat, but this movie has already established that there is a threatening presence there, but I don't know where it is, that's horror movie 101, dudes. Look at something like Halloween, where Michael Myers was placed in different parts of the screen, so you never knew where he was going to be at, but you knew his ass was going to show up. We don't know when Longlegs is going to show up, but we already know he's somewhere in there. That was just chef's kiss, beautiful all around. This is why I watch horror films. This gave me what I've been looking for in a horror movie. I eat shit like that up, man. But I do have another highlight to do before I have my finale for this episode. I want to talk about the woman of the hour. And no, not the movie. I'm talking about Lee Harker herself. I said earlier that this felt like a Clarice Starling 2.0, but I really liked her character. And I did a little bit of some research to see how audiences have analyzed the character of Lee Harker. There were some that found her to be an autistic character, and I'm like, I can see that. I have a lot of autistic friends that do share same or similar mannerisms that Lee Harker does, like being around people and kind of just being in her own bubble and whatnot. And some of that could just be like, an FBI agent just needing to solve a case. But if she is a good game player that 100% just likes her own solitude, she has her own vibe, I don't know, you could kind of see it as both things, but I agree with both answers. But I also did some reading about the woman who plays Lee Harker, Maika Monroe. She's a name that I've seen popping up a lot. She came all the way from a movie called It Follows, which I have not seen yet, but it followed her entire career, and she's landed herself into some nice fucking horror movies. There is one that she did earlier this year called The Watcher that was, kind of like watching paint dry, but she kept everything intriguing while the film was just an equivalent of paint drying. And then to hear that she was popping up in this movie, and I'm just like, you go, girl. She did such a fantastic job, and she fought for this movie. When she found out that there was a possibility that she wasn't going to be getting the role, and she felt like she was so suited for it, she sent an audition tape. And whatever she did in that audition tape that felt the most like Lee Harker, that's how she became Lee Harker. And my God, that woman deserves this role. She was so compelling. Even when she wasn't saying anything, it's like you could still feel the emoting from it all. She is in a very uncomfortable territory. This is someone that you're following, that you're supposed to have faith into, but you're also scared for. She's someone that you have faith in, but you also don't want anything to happen to her. She's still fair game, even though she's our heroine. So before I go on to my final musings of Longlegs, I found a piece of trivia that I'm curious about. It says here, to promote the film, Neon created a phone number which, if dialed, played a pre-recorded, extremely disturbing message from Nicolas Cage as the killer. And I am going to call this number and see for myself if it still exists. Now, there's a good chance, some numbers that it's, going to be vacant and whatnot. But if we hear frickin' Nicolas Cage on here, that's going to be fucking wild. And if we get someone else, I'm just going to hang up the phone. But why not? Let's have some fun and see if this works, dudes. Because, all right, I'm pressing call. If we get someone else, we didn't hear nothing.
Welcome to Verizon Wireless. Your call cannot be completed as dialed. Please hang up and redial the number.
Yeah, it's done for. It's gone. Well, at least I tried. Well, but it would have been funnier at the end of that if I hear "Hail Satan" and be like, oh. So for my final musings about Longlegs, I feel like this movie has the potential to be regarded as a great movie in time. I wrote an article about this movie, and one of the things that I felt is going to help this movie is just to let it marinate for a few more years. When we get fresh new media, it's a tough call how it's going to be interpreted. Sometimes it's immediate success and sometimes it's not, but there's always room to change. There's been many movies that had been regarded as crap or not good enough, and they would eventually be regarded as more than what it was originally made out to be. I mean, look at something like Dune, for God's sakes. Dune was very much not liked, but it just wasn't the right era yet. Gave it some years and boom. Now everyone's doing something with Dune. And I feel like the same thing goes for Longlegs. There are really great things in this movie. The shots are spectacular. The acting is spectacular. And that ending shouldn't derail all of that makes a great horror film. We got a once-in-a-lifetime film made by the guy who's the son of Psycho with Nicolas Cage playing the killer. Like, that feels like something we should have already had, and we didn't know we needed it until now. It's still set out to be like one rotten ending shouldn't ruin the good 2/3 of this movie. When you look back at it again and you see Osgood Perkins' story into this, how it feeds into Lee Harker, and knowing that Nicolas Cage was absolutely, pun intended, pitch perfect for this role, there's too many accolades to take away, and an ending shouldn't take away all that other stuff. When it comes to a lot of mistakes or a lot of things we don't like, we focus on the one bad thing and not the other good things. There are other good things that Osgood did in this, and they should be appreciated. I will be adding Longlegs to my collection, and what more could I ask for that? Who knew it just takes a little bit psycho to get uncaged to make something work? And I'm absolutely going to end it on that. And that is going to be a wrap for 2024 on The Screen Queen. We started out with, what was it? Robin Hood, I think? And then we end with Longlegs. This was a very interesting year for the show. This was a good way to end the year and to end things for a little while before I jump into my next huge project of my life. But before I go and send you guys off and get into the next year, preparing for it like fucking Squid Game, let's find out what the next episode is going to be on The Screen Queen. What's going to get us into 2025, and Lord, it better be good. Better be hopeful too, man. We need one. We need a good, hopeful movie. Let's pray my lotto system gives us one. All right. I got what? Let's see what you are. Okay. I'll take that. That I asked for hope and I got it. I'll take it. 100%. So for the first episode to bring us into 2025 is Lars and the Real Girl. I've been waiting for this movie. That'll be good. Alrighty. Well, thank you so much for being here. If you want to catch up with me in between uploads, you can find me on my Instagram at the Queen of the Screen. I'm currently going through a new content craze, so I'm hoping to be a little more active on there with some fun behind the scenes stuff and some cool things in the works. If you want another way to listen to your Media Queen, I am also available on YouTube. Just look for The Screen Queen. Not too hard to find me with the girl with the circle glasses. And lastly, I hope everyone has a wonderful new year, because god damn it, we deserve it. Was just like the nastiest thing that we got in recent years, that it like out nasties the other nasty things we've had in years. And I'm sure a lot of people are going to agree with me, but it can't be nasty forever. I know that's preaching to the choir because everyone's lives are different, but we do need some good things, and we do deserve good things. If I want that for myself, then I want that for others. And we need all that together. We got to stick to that. We made it through 2024. We can make it through 2025. We're almost through this weird ass decade. Alrighty. Well, you all take care now and have a happy new year. This is your Screen Queen, signing off. Bye-bye!